So thank you very much, Akiva, and for joining us today. So without further ado, I would like also to invite the next speaker, which is an Israeli company called, we will do it alphabetically. So the first company will be Aerovation, represented by Mr. Gil Tomer. He is one of the co-founders as well as the chief operating officer of the company. So Gil, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Now, I grew up in a city called Tel Aviv, and as many of you know, it's just sitting alongside the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, and there's usually pretty good air. But we grew up just not far from a power station, a power plant that was just near my home. And all along the years, back then, the technology was not that developed, and also the awareness was not that high for the pollution that's coming from these plants. And I saw a lot of kids, including my sister, suffering from respiratory problems, and I could see it from very close and really understand how deep is the problem and how important it is to have fresh air as a natural resource that we can all use indoors and in the outdoors. So my name is Gil Tomer. I'm Chief Operating Officer and co-founder at Aerovation Technologies, and I'm really excited to be speaking to you today about our technologies that we've developed so far to this stage, that we can actually commercialize it right here in Korea. And especially in such crazy times, to be speaking to you face to face after 2 years, I think it's even enhancing the problem and how important it is to be very much aware of what we are breathing and to try to control as much as possible whatever we're taking into our lungs and back to the atmosphere. So Aerovation Technologies is actually a spin-off of our previous company that was formed in order to create a safe area that will be shielded from toxic smoke and toxic air in case of fires. And the name Aerovation is capturing the essence of our company, which is essentially to innovate air solutions and to provide solutions for air purification and air reforming in different applications. So we now focus on two main verticals because our maybe key capability is to treat CO2, to convert CO2, to capture CO2 in a very efficient way. So we utilize this technology or this capability in two different areas. In one of them, we are very much developed, and this is actually why we're here right now in Korea, in order to collaborate with our Korean partners to utilize our core technology into air purification and air reforming systems for indoors. And then we're now accelerating something that's been discussed and something that's been already developed 3 or 4 years ago. And we didn't have the right atmosphere or the right support from the global community, from governments, and also for corporates all around the world, focusing now on ESG, what allowed us to start accelerating our carbon capture technology to complete other technologies in the big fight against global pollution and climate change, and of course, the greenhouse gases, which is the essential problem that we need to treat. So our technology was born in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem with over a decade of research that was conducted by Professor Yoel Sasson and his talented research team. And Professor Yoel Sasson is highly accredited in the field of environmental solutions, and mainly in the air solution, water purification, and soil purification, with over 45 applicable patents that are already commercialized in these fields. And his team invented or found a way to utilize and to stable a molecule that's called superoxide radical. Now, this superoxide radical is a molecule, it's one of the strongest oxidizers in nature. And there is actually a capability to control and to maintain this in an environment that we have been able to optimize and we've been able to utilize for our needs for air purification. So this highly efficient oxidizer is able to control or able to sterilize bacteria, sterilize viruses, which became very much essential and very much relevant in the last 2 years, of course. But on top of that, it is able to capture and to mineralize carbon dioxide and other acidic gases. So this was a very big breakthrough in the field of the research of the superoxide radical, And our company has now the license, the exclusive license. And of course, we have developed this patent to further IP that will be, make us able and capable in treating air in the domains that we are treating on. So if you would see, if you look at that, what we have developed, if you can press.
Our health and well-being with each and every breath. Aerovation Technologies goes beyond filtering to eliminate even the smallest airborne threats. Our patented chemistry creates the most powerful oxidizer in nature, Superoxide Radical, for an on-demand purification. This unique process is tested and proven to eliminate coronavirus and bacteria, while converting harmful gases into fresh air, enriched with oxygen. Aerovation's breakthrough technology is the next generation of air purification.
So I hope you had a chance to really assess and understand what we're talking about, but I think that the key term would be beyond filtering. So as of today, most of the technologies are relying on HEPA filters, which are very, very much efficient against PM, particulate matters, against fine dust, and some of them are even efficient against some of the VOCs and some of the bigger pollutants that are still penetrating those filters. But the smaller ones, the smaller particles, and mainly the molecules, the gas molecules of CO2 and other gases, like other kinds of VOCs, can very much easily penetrate the HEPA filter. And the other technologies that try to complete or try to face this problem are very much limited. So we look at our technology not as an air purifying technology, but as an air reformer that can actually improve the air quality, and not just in the long term of exposure, of our exposure and our health, in PM, being exposed to PM, but also the immediate effect on our well-being when lowering down the levels of CO2 and other gases in the room, and also enriching the air with oxygen as a byproduct of the process. We are now here in Korea mainly to test and to reach to the next or touch the next milestone and kickstart the commercialization process and the joint development that we are running with one of the leading brands in Korea. And our vision is to collaborate with multiple brands in multiple areas, regional areas, license our technology, because we are not a consumer company. We're just concentrating on what we're best in, which is the R&D and the really optimization of the technology and the software that we have developed in order to control the chemistry and to control the reaction in order for it to be cost effective, but well performing enough. So we're using it in hotels, it can be used in clinics, it can be used, of course, in classes, classrooms, and it will tremendously affect the capabilities and the cognition of students who are sitting in classrooms and cannot get ventilated air from the outside because the air outside is either polluted or it's too hot or too cold, and then it needs to be recooled and reheated. So we are very much proud on what we have developed, and we are getting a lot of traction from companies and from corporates around the world that are interested in embedding our technology into their air purifying systems and create a new category in indoor air purification. But that's not the only thing that we are after, because we are an air technology platform or air solution platform. We are also starting to tackle the environmental problem that we actually did 3 years ago. So please look.
When you turn obstacles into opportunities, when you turn the impossible into possible, that's when you really change the world.
Many said it couldn't be done, but we did it.
Aerovation Technologies is a carbon capture company on a mission to deliver healthy air to our next generations. We ask ourselves a challenging question: how do we actually make a zero carbon world a reality? Our answer is that we need to find a way to reduce CO2 and use CO2 so we don't lose to CO2.
The technological breakthrough took over 10 years of R&D at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. It's been tested and proven at the UL laboratories in Chicago, and it's ready for field implementation today. Our award-winning technology profitably converts industrial CO2 emissions into valuable mineral end products that can be used in food, glass, and fertilizer industries.
The chemical invention is in creating the most powerful oxidizer in nature, called superoxide radical. For the first time, carbon dioxide can be rapidly converted into oxygen and high-purity carbonate and bicarbonate minerals.
For every 1 ton of polluting CO2 you give me from a smokestack, I can transform it into 1 ton of oxygen and 2 tons of valuable industrial minerals.
Join us in creating zero-carbon factories with leading partners around the world.
Now is the time for zero carbon action. Together, we can turn trash into treasure and create a zero carbon future.
So, as I mentioned, 2 or 3 years ago, we came back from Chicago, and where we validated our technology and our tremendous capabilities to really capture high concentration of CO2 and sometimes mixed with other gases with great results and great mineralization process to an absolute purification over 95%. And we came back and we connected ourselves to a plant in northern Israel who is highly polluting with the pilot that was created with the Israeli government, with the Israeli Environmental Protection Ministry. And then we started showcasing the technology to the world, to corporates. And 2 years ago, I think there was no single corporate that was willing to actually invest money in this operation of CO2 capturing. And we came to a conclusion, right, that the world is simply not ready for that. And the change or the big shift that happened in the last year is something that is something to mention, because we found ourselves suddenly in the ice storm, right? Getting so much traction and so much interest from so many different corporates around the world that are suddenly interested in the ESG and mainly in taking responsibility from what they're emitting and from what they are contributing to the world. So we think that the ground is already ready. And the beta site that we are now aiming to deploy in Israel is in one of the hydrogen factories in Israel. And we found hydrogen as a niche that we are very much interested in concentrating on or focusing on, because mainly hydrogen, first of all, is a highly growing industry, and we look at it as the green energy of the future. There's, I think, no doubt about it. But we have the exact best optimal terms that we need in order to make the best value proposition when utilizing our technology. So with using our technology in the hydrogen field, we can create a profitable equation that will rely on 3 key elements that when utilizing or using all of them, the 3 of them, we can actually create this profitable equation. So the first would be the turn from a gray hydrogen, so even a gray ammonia, which is kind of a very similar process made from methane gas. And this gray ammonia is something that would not be sellable in many developed countries that are already opposing their will and posing their regulation towards the green or carbon neutrality and net carbon zero by 2050. And the blue hydrogen is going to be much more valuable product. Then the second justification for the operational expenses and for the capital expenses would be the minerals, the sale of the valuable minerals that we are creating, those minerals that we are creating by capturing the CO2 into those salts. Those are commodities that can be sold as fertilizers, that can be sold for industries like glass industries, TV industries, feed industry, food industry, and even for pharma. And all of these commodities in high grade are going to justify the costs of the operational expenses of the carbon capturing. And then the last one would be, of course, the help of the regulators and the help of countries all around the world that are starting to accelerate and starting to create this model of carbon credits, fines, and sometimes incentives, right, in order to control and to reach this high goal of 2050 carbon neutrality. So what we're talking about is, again, we are not giving any solution or any solution to the world that will actually rid the world of the carbon. It's a tremendous effort that needs to be done and conducted by a lot of technologies that will be integrated together in order to deal with this enormous challenge that humanity is facing right now. But we're proud to be part of it, and we think that we're adding a lot of value to these specific niches of hydrogen and ammonia generation. So our vision is to create a world with less carbon and to integrate our technology with a lot of other companies in order to help and integrate with the effort, with the global effort of 2050 net carbon zero emissions. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and thank you for the embassy and for the commercial attaché of Israel. Thank you for the opportunity. Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gil. And I would like now to invite Ms. Adar Abramovich, who is the speaker, the representative of MagniLearn. It's an education technologies company. So Adar, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, nice to meet you, everybody. My name is Hadar. I'm leading the business and strategy at MagniLearn. MagniLearn is education as a service company, and I will elaborate on our technology right now. So first of all, I would like to start and share with you that it's surprising to see that Korea, the awesome and amazing story of Korea, with being one of the fastest growing economy around the world, ranked number 10th by GDP, ranked only number 32 by English proficiency around the world. Worldwide, there is a direct correlation between the level of English proficiency of a population and economy of growth. And this is a strong point to emphasize the fundamental impact that English can have on the Korean society, on the national level, on the individual level, and how it can affect the life of the new generation. Let's start and understand why there is such a big gap. So let's think about it. Maybe Koreans do not invest in education, in English education. This is not the fact. This is not the case. Korea invests huge amount of money. Korean parents invest and send their kids to private after schools, to Hagwon, and 50% of those expenses, 18 billion a year, 50% on that go in English education. Maybe it's the pattern and the way that Koreans are studying at school. Actually, it's not the case. Korean students are highly diligent. They are dedicated and studying for long hours at schools. And in addition to this, English is the subject that parents spend the most on each and every year, more than coding, more than math, more than Korean language. So what do we have here? We have high expenditure, long hours, but poor result. Let's start to understand the problems. First, we have passive students. And here I want to make sure that you understand this is a worldwide educational crisis. I'm focusing here on the Korean market, but this is related to the whole industry that must be disrupted and will disrupt in the next few years. So we have passive students that are sitting in class, guessing, memorizing, repeating what the teacher said. Second thing, we have lack of personalization. We are in the 2021 year. We need to understand no two brains are alike. We cannot give the same lessons, the same materials to students. It just doesn't work. And the last thing is the lack of knowledge tracking. In Korea, we doesn't feed the level of the language teaching to the level of the student. We don't know what the student knows and what he doesn't know. And this directly affects the level of efficiency. So how come we study a language for 15 years, but still the results are poor? here comes MagniLearn. And MagniLearn is a game changer in the field. Why? We target and focus on significantly improve learning efficiency by hyper-personalized technology and knowledge tracking. I know it sounds very complicated, but let's focus and see what does it mean. First, we're a B2B company. We're not one of more these apps, B2C apps that there are so many in the market to get today. We target only educational institute. And I will tell you one more thing. English is just the tip of the iceberg of our product capability. Basically, we can teach every verbal subject, every concept, and integrate it into our technology. I will explain now how it works, but first, who we are. We have three founders, three of them and myself from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Our CEO, Dr. Lana Tokus, has a PhD in science education. Michal Etzioni has a PhD in computer science. She's our CDO. And Professor Ari Rapaport, he's an active professor in the Hebrew University running one of the top 10 natural language processing labs in the world. In order to understand the product, we need to understand the science behind it and not just to see what is going on right now. And myself, living in Korea for the last 6 years, most of the time on the line between Japan, Korea, and Israel, in this year, staying here in Seoul. Our product is backed by the Israeli Innovation Authority. We have an approval from the Israeli Ministry of Education and is based on more than 8 years of academic research in the field of neuroscience, cognition, language acquisition, and education. I would like to share with you what is our core technology, what is actually all about. First thing, we focus on knowledge tracking. What does it mean, knowledge tracking? For each and every student that study on MagniLearn platform, we create a knowledge map. We actually took the language and we are taking a granulation approach. Granulation is an approach that actually, granulation comes from taking a solid and form it into a very, very small pieces. This is what we did to the English language. We form it into a very small, tiny expressions, word, grammatical pattern, which allow our AI engine to analyze not just the answer, each and every part of the answer, and understand the proficiency level and the level of understanding of each student on a specific item. Why this is important? Because in this way, we can target efficiency. We know exactly what exercise to feed to the students in the right time. The only thing that is predefined is the curriculum. The curriculum that was defined by the school and by the educational institute. Beside that, guys, we do not have pre-prepared lessons. We are hyper-personalized, extremely personalized platform, means that we do not have lessons that are ready. 2 lessons will never be the same. Students that learn on the platform will never get the same questions. This all builds on the fly by an AI engine that fit to the level of the student, his knowledge, and the curriculum, target exactly what we want to teach. This hyper-personalized level almost does not exist in the market because I'm talking about open questions, writing answers inside what actually creates students that are active, thinking creatively and flexibly about the answer, not just passive student. The last thing, and this is what allows us to penetrate to the Korean and Japanese market and to launch our product here next month, and we're very excited about it, it's the flexible platform architecture. The way that the technology is built means that we can integrate to each and every school curriculum, textbook, and go on. We can also take every content that is available in the market and enter it into our technology. What does it mean? For example, we can work with book publisher, take their content, and in few days turn it from static content to a smart AI textbook. We can work with companies like Netflix or Disney and take every movie and movie subtitles and turn them into an interactive English learning lessons. And this is something very unique because most of the English platform today cannot penetrate into the traditional educational market because they cannot fit to the curriculum of the school. And this is a game changer in the B2B market. Yes. So who are our customers? We launch our product, actually, we start our sales and marketing effort in APAC in February, less than 4 months. Right now, we secured a strong partner in Japan. They have 61 cram schools around the country. Also in Korea, we have our first partner, Belt English. They have more than 1,500 students around the country. And I'm talking about Hagwon, private education. Our plan is to start with private education and to expand, hopefully, with the Korean government to public schools, focus on AI and digital learning in schools. Second, target customers are book publisher. We secured a partnership with Bisang, one of the third book publishers in Korea, to turn their content into interactive and to teach with their content hyper-personalized lessons. And the third thing, we are backed by Microsoft that recognized our technology recently, working with them in order to see how we can get more data, intelligence, insights to help teachers to teach better. And here we're building a unique platform that will actually allow us to give different stakeholders data in different resolutions, help them to identify the gaps and understand the strength of weaknesses and weaknesses of each and every student. I will summarize by this slide just to show you how big the opportunity is. The educational market is booming. The COVID-19 actually left 1.3 billion students depending on online solution. And at the end of the day, most of them learned with Zoom. What does it mean? They're not good quality AI-based solution for teaching in the market. And we do not see ourselves as a language company. English is just our first step to the market. And we believe Korea and Japan will be a great target markets to show the efficiency of our product. But to summarize, we actually target the whole traditional market. We target institute that did not, in a market that was not disrupted actually since the Industrial Revolution. I thank you very much for the time and looking forward to talk with all of you. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Adar. And moving from Aerovation with carbon capturing technologies and education technologies with Adar, we will now talk about some future technologies of data science. And this is with Elad Siti, the co-founder and CEO at Neuroblade. So Elad, please, the floor is yours.
Great. Hey, so thanks everyone for coming to listen. And thanks again to everyone from the Next Race team and from the Israeli embassy for hosting us here. So I'm going to try to fit within the 10 minutes, and it's a lot to go over. So feel free to come and ask any question later. Before we touch about what Neuroblade is doing, I'm going to elaborate a little bit on the field that we are working at. Not working? Okay. So over the last 2 years, half of the world's data has been created. So this means that the amounts of data are growing bigger and bigger and faster and faster. And there are a couple of interesting facts about it. So only 2% of the data was analyzed. And data companies have been collecting it for years, but it's coming from many different places today, in data centers, in the edge, some of it for real-time processing, some of it for just to extracting insights. So this is a very strategic workload for any company that wants to grow, wants to further understand its customers, understand its production processes, and so on. And this is actually a workload to analyze data that has been around for years. People have been running databases and asking different questions in SQL, again, for years. So why now? Why is it becoming more interesting? And this is because the data scales. And when the data, when the data scales, computer systems are just not built to deal with it. And this is where NeuroBlade fits in. So what we build at NeuroBlade is actually an accelerator to speed up data-intensive workloads, or workloads that are more about data rather than about computing. And this really fits in with the fact that those kind of workloads are becoming more and more relevant and more challenging. And as I said, this is really a lot of grounds to cover, and this is a really deep tech company. But eventually, when you want to solve this problem, you have to change the paradigm a little bit. And the key to be able to execute and run faster those specific workloads is because we developed a new kind of memory that is able to actually process the data while in the memory, instead of having to send it to the CPU. So getting a little bit technical, but I think I can keep it high level enough. So computer systems today are what we call CPU-centric systems. Okay, you have the CPU in the center, and usually that's very good. It interacts with the memory, it interacts with the storage, with the disks. But what happens when the workload is mostly about data, and the CPU is just standing idle, waiting for the data to arrive through these red lines or red pipes. It means the system is now just clogged and the CPU is underutilized. And this is what does not allow for processing of massive amounts of data today. And when the problem has to scale even further, the memories are staying small, the closely coupled memories are staying small, and then you need to reach out to the disks, you need to reach out to the networking to be able to talk to other systems, and goes on, and it becomes even slower. And as I said, what we needed to do is to break the system and try to rebuild it. So we developed our XRAM technology, which is a computational memory technology. We took those memories and those CPU, and we actually took parts of the CPU, embedded them into the memory. And this is exactly what our XRAM technology is about. So this solves the bottleneck, so this solves the bottleneck between the memory and the CPU. But today it's not really enough. You need to build a full system to actually gain the benefits of such technology. So we actually went ahead and solved the entire bottlenecks in the system. We developed our own data analytics processor, which is tailored to utilize those new extra memories, which, as I said, actually compute the data in place. So you don't need to transfer the data from place to place. And also opened a very wide bandwidth to the storage, to the networking. And if you look at how this looks like in real life, so this is actually a data center appliance that we developed with our computational memories inside it. This fits into a data center rack. So if you are a big company like Samsung, Lotte, or Hyundai, or any of the big companies in Korea, if you're Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and you're already dealing with this kind of big problems, you just add in this, add into your host this accelerator and speed up over 100 times, basically, those exact kind of workloads. So looking into the future, NeuroBlade is now focused on speeding up data analytics. This is only one kind of data-intensive workload, but this technology of computational memories and the entire system that we built with the software, with the algorithms, it's a great fit for many different use cases that are data-intensive and are becoming more and more relevant these days. So right now, as I said, our focus is on structured data, or you could say SQL queries. Then you have unstructured data. Gene sequencing, of course, is huge today. It is a great fit for our technology. Homomorphic acceleration is a field that is becoming more and more relevant. AI recommendation systems. This is actually one of the use cases we've started with and showed very promising results, but eventually had to focus on a use case to start with. And again, we can support all those kind of workloads. So basically what we're trying to do is you know, if you have Intel, AMD being the CPU companies, focused on the very general purpose computing, being the conductor of the system. You have the GPU companies like NVIDIA focused on the compute intensive workloads. We are actually bringing in a new type of acceleration focused, not competing with the CPUs and GPUs, but actually bringing in an orthogonal solution to accelerate data intensive workloads, which, as I said, are the next big thing. Thanks.
So thank you very much, Elad. And while we are arranging some chairs here on the stage for our next session, and please bear with us. So meaning, are we arranging some 6 chairs for our panel? I would like to say that, first of all, thank you for all the companies that just presented. And let's just arrange some chairs. And I would like also to tell you that when I was a kid, let's bring the chairs, right, while I'm speaking. And maybe we will call Dror and Dov and the Israeli startups. Let's join for the panel, right? Okay. So, yeah, maybe let's put them on the stage here. דוב, אני מציע אולי תשב פה במרכז. Thank you. דרור, בוא שב. הדר, גיל, בואו, אלעד כמובן. בואו, שבו. So guys, thank you very much for staying with us and following this very interesting presentation by the Israeli companies. I would like to open the next stage of our panel, which is actually a short discussion between ourselves. Maybe I will sit like that. So first, I would like to welcome Dov Moran, that came all the way from Israel yesterday. So welcome, Dov, and maybe you would like to introduce yourself to the crowd a little bit.
1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, that's fine. First, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I was in my life. I think that I was in my life about 50 times in Korea. I traveled 50 times to Korea. So it's a great being here once again. Actually, this is the first place I went out of Israel in the last year and a half because of the COVID-19. Great being here. Great meeting Korean friends. Great being with you.
So thank you, Dov. And as I said earlier in our previous session, Dov actually invented the USB flash drive and sold his company M System to SanDisk. And now he's the managing partner of Grove VC, a venture capital in Israel. So thank you very much, Dov, for joining us. Together with us is also Mr. Dror Gadot. Would you like to introduce yourself shortly?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. I lived in Korea for the last 7 years. I run the Open Innovation group of Samsung SDS. Probably my Korean fellows here know the name. And we are essentially the B2B IT vendor of anything from managed security service to cloud to the Samsung group and the Samsung affiliated companies around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So also for the viewers here and the viewers online over Zoom, I think that now we would like to ask some questions to the Israeli companies that join us. So maybe Dov, would you like to take the first question?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Anyway, didn't bother to introduce myself. First, many Koreans know me. I had actually, I established 2 companies in Korea. I established as part of M Systems. I established a sales office in Korea. Actually, it was much more than sales. Which did very, very well. We worked with many Korean companies, especially Samsung, LG at the times. M Systems, the company who made or they used the flash drive, I was luckily the inventor of this. Then I established another company called Modu, and that's something that not too many people know, but Modu had an R&D center here in Korea to do the industrial design of the phones. Korea was always great with cellular phones, Samsung, LG, others. And we did have amazing group here to do actually the smallest phone in the world. Not as lucky as the case in the case of M Systems. You know, you try a lot, you fail sometimes. Actually, today, looking at my history, when Modu failed, I felt very, very bad. You know, hey, it's failure, cost money, big investment. Today, when I look backward, I look at it as a success because out of Modu came great technologies, great companies, over 30 companies in Israel. Some of them did very, very well. So it's like you didn't succeed with your son, but your grandchildren are wonderful. That's okay as well. And how do you define success? Is it only money? Is it technology that you brought to the world? Maybe friends and partnership? So I still have partners and friends in Korea from that time. But I want to ask you questions. Are you ready? Are you ready? You sure? Israelis in general like challenges. So yeah, they are ready. Of course, they are ready. They're ready to beat me if I won't be nice to them. First of all, clean tech is great. Why did you come to Korea for clean tech?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Actually, I've been asked that a couple of times during my visit here. It's been lasting for almost 3 weeks since we arrived. So firstly, we came to Korea for the home appliance because we already have an ongoing business with a Korean company in the home appliance field. And we have very interesting results and very good results. We've actually been held in Israel with the next milestone of this collaboration with this Korean company because of the COVID situation. So at last, finally, we could go out of Israel, test our prototype and go forward to the next stage of the commercialization. So we started on that, and that's not pure clean tech, even though we're treating CO2. They're interested in the CO2, but indoors, and as we all know, Koreans are amazing, have amazing home appliance companies, amazing consumer distributors and designers. And so, of course, that's the main reason. But in the clean tech area, there is a lot of interest now from Korean corporates and a lot of responsibility being taken by Korean corporates, you know, diving into the ESG, but especially in the E, right, in the environmental side. And the chemical production here, the energy production in here is very advanced technologies, also petrochemistry, and of course, these are very much advanced in here. So the fact that the government gave the signal to the markets, right, with this ambitious goal of carbon neutrality by 2050, all the corporates started coming to us because they know about the existence of our technology from 2 years ago and even more than that. And we found a lot of interest and a lot of openness from the Korean companies to collaborate. And then the last part of the answer would be that we have investors from Korea, great investors, and we already have collaborations in Korea. And we've learned that the completion between the Israeli people and the Korean people is very interesting, and it can be very fruitful to the whole world, to the whole globe, because Israel is a startup nation, and we'll look at Korea as somewhat the scale-up nation, and together we can do great things.
Thanks, Gil. And I think both you and Dov, you touched upon a very important point in the relationship between Korea and Israel, that taking the Israeli technologies and implementing them here in Korea, establishing R&D centers, establishing production and so on. This is the core opportunity between the countries. I would like to move to Dror. Dror, from your vast experience here in Korea and your perspective on Korean IT industry, would you like to propose a question to either Adar or Elad from MagniLearn or Neuroblade?
I would like to start with Neuroblade, if you don't mind. So I understand, I didn't have too much time to learn about it, but from your presentation, I understand that this is a whole new architecture. So I'm not sure if the question is accurate, but
go ahead.
It sounded a little bit like Bluefield NVIDIA to me, and I wanted to ask you about the overlap, if any, and what kind of use cases you think would, I saw 4 use cases you mentioned, but maybe with pilots you have right now, what is more common?
So first of all, I'd say this is not really a competition to NVIDIA. It's a different optimization point of a workload. Okay, NVIDIA is very focused on whatever is compute intensive. You need a lot of multipliers and adders, and you try to just put it all into one CPU, and you don't have a lot of memory activity. But what happens when you need to optimize for another side of the equation, okay? When there's just huge amounts of data and you just need to touch the data. You don't need to do a whole lot of processing on it. The challenge is processing a lot of data. So this is actually different than what NVIDIA offers. If you try to take a GPU to run on those tasks, it would not be that effective. It would definitely not be very attractive from price and cost performance. So again, different point of optimization. And this is why you need a new architecture. And I have to say also NVIDIA is always looking into new memory technologies because faster memory brings you faster performance overall, but you need to write a fine optimization point. So I hope that covers the first part of your question. The second question that you asked is the use cases. So those 4 use cases in the presentation, they're actually not the use case that we are focused on right now. The use case that we are focused on right now is actually much bigger. So it's simple accelerating your SQL workloads. And this goes into really every vertical today. It's not like AI, what people call AI, which is a promise of the future. This is like things that are actually happening in companies today. And we are engaged with a number of customers that, when we reached out to them first, they told us, I don't think we have a problem. And then they called in 6 months later, we are starting to get more and more requirements from our internal teams, from our customers that we are not meeting the requirements for speed. So they came, okay, you mentioned you can help us. And that happened, in the last 2 years. We've actually seen this happen. And I think I mentioned it briefly. We started with recommendation engine, and then the market actually took us to, let's speed up in-memory databases. Let's speed up SQL queries. And we found amazing design partners, huge companies, and these workloads are just getting bigger, and we see it. So we found ourselves with a very disruptive technology. Not ashamed to say it, because not many people have tried putting logic into memories, and at the right time, where there is actually a use to utilize such technology and take it to the market.
Maybe just because you said design partners, maybe one brief question. Are you aiming more for hyperscalers, or will you look for use cases in the enterprise as well?
So again, one thing that's really great about this specific market, it's not aimed just at hyperscalers. So this problem is also occurring at many Fortune 500 companies. I'm not going to say we're targeting a hedge fund that wants to buy just 1 or 2 pieces. We are looking at really data centers. But again, this is something that's very widely common and starting to gain more traction.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have actually 2 quick questions for Adal. But on the second question, I think also Dov would like to comment later on. So first 2 questions to Adal. The first one, what are the barriers that you see when working here in Korea, in Japan, when it comes to educational technologies like that, versus what you experience in Israel when you try to promote those kind of education technologies? This is the first question. The second one, also for you, Dov, later on, I saw that also in Magnilearn, as well as with Aerovation, there are many PhDs, professors from university in Israel. So in Israel, there's a lot of taking of like those kind of academic projects and transforming them into actual product. Maybe you can refer to that and the process that you guys at Magnilearn passed through. So maybe start with the first one on the barriers.
Okay, sure. So first of all, when we take a look on the educational industry in Israel and compare it to Asia, so there are huge gaps, because in Israel, we focus on public education. And for us, it took time to get approval by the Ministry of Education. But the moment we got it, that's it. The door is open and we can expand very fast in the K-12 market in Israel. And this is what we're doing today, working with thousands of students and working with the higher education. The big difference is that in Korea and Japan, the markets are heavily rely on private education. Now, this is a big pro actually for us, but there are also cons. The big pro is that the time to market is much faster. It's easier for us to come, to present ourselves to Hagwons, to private education, CEO, principal can make fast decision, and that's it, we're in. Another pro, and then I will come to the obstacles, is the advantage of the product that we have, that we can actually integrate to the curriculum. The main challenges are actually to come to Korea and explain the difference between technologies that are existing in the market. Because Korean like technology, but in contrast to almost every field in Korea, the educational market was not yet disrupted. What Koreans have in the educational market are different kinds of games to teach English, very advanced UI that looks pretty good and very attractive for preschool and elementary school. But actually the main companies and the leaders in the market as Kyowon, Ice Cream, Bisang, and all the leading in the educational field are still lacking of AI solution. The moment they understand the difference about from personalization, which is a key word and a trendy word in the market, to extremely personalized lessons that are created on the fly, the moment that they understand that there is AI engine that can create online feedback in the native language of the speaking, what turns us from not being just a training platform, being a teaching platform when we provide insights to the student how and feedback on how to improve his difficulty points, we're taking it to another level. And this is to become an educational platform.
And maybe your quick thoughts about this kind of issue of transforming academic research into commercialized technology, and then we will move to Dov on the same issue.
Okay. So
your experience in Magnilearn, for example.
Yeah. So I think the research that we have done that actually integrate neuroscience, cognition, science education, and everything together. By the way, in addition to so many women in the company that leading this big educational change, I think this is something that is highly appreciated in Korea. And I'm not sure I fully understand your question.
Yes,
so
so
you can
maybe
repeat.
we will move to Dov on the same issue of like taking academic research into high tech, into startups.
So I'll talk about it, but clearly I do have a question to you, and I won't go away without my question. Okay, but yeah, Israel is very strong in the relations between the academy and the industry. A fund like ours is highly involved in what's going on in the developments in Weizmann Institute, in Technion, in Tel Aviv University, Hebrew University. Clearly, professors are professors. They're doing their research. What they like to do is to have a paper. If they write paper about the research they've done, that's their glory, that's their life, they're happy. But every university today has an office of commerce, of commercialization of the patents and the technology. And we do have in our fund several projects that began with universities, got into reality. Maybe one very, very known case is the case of Mobileye, which this was actually an invention of a professor from the Hebrew University that said, hey, I'm worried about traveling in car, and how can I eliminate or decrease accidents? Okay, since he's a professor of AI and expert in using AI for analyzing pictures, video, he got into the idea of the Mobileye, actually ahead of time. And Mobileye today is the leader worldwide in ADAS, in assistant driving and autonomous cars. So yeah, the connection exists. It's very, very healthy connection. But can I go to the question to her? I have a question because I think that I know the answer, okay? But let me see if we have the same answer. What made you go to Korea and not to China? I'll tell you why do I ask about China and Korea. China clearly much larger market. You cannot compare. In China, the issue of English is very, very crucial. The English teaching in China is much worse than English teaching in Korea. Korea in general is relatively good. The Koreans I met in my life, all of them, almost all of them knew English quite well. In China, many times you talk with people and they have to use translators and you just don't know English. Still, you went to Korea. Why?
Okay, thank you for the question. First, I will answer from my personal experience in Korea. I live here for the last 7 years. Unfortunately, most of the business people that I met didn't speak English the way they wanted to speak. I do believe that if Korea as a nation will improve their English speaking ability, the opportunities to penetrate to international sectors, to global partnerships, and to collaborations are huge, and this will highly impact the country. So there is a lot of room for improvement in Korea, Japan, but also in China. We start with Korea and Japan, first because of the GDP. They're strong countries, the high expenses of private education. It's true that it's also correct in China, but there are huge gaps over there. Second thing, in China, there are many dialects. Here and in our product, we use the native language of the speaker. We use Japanese and Korean inside the product to make sure we're not only training, we're teaching and educating. And this was a big challenge for us. Our first product focused on English, and here we believe we can scale very fast. I will not mention also the political risk and other reasons that we have, but we believe that after we will show good results in the market from next month and on, the doors will open in China. And I will be honest, we have a lot of requests from Hong Kong and China to go to this market, but we want to do it safe and right.
Well, I had another answer. I guess the answer is because you like kimchi. No?
This is
Okay.
also correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think now Dror has maybe a quick question, maybe to Aerovation.
So as a consumer, maybe I'll ask it, and I admit I did not understand 100% if you are aiming more for consumer or more for like enterprises / factories. Maybe you can refer to that too. And I also understand that you are also aiming for OEM market, right? It's not going to be your own product, but you're going to embed it somehow. So a brief comment as a consumer, we live in Korea. We're very sensitive to air pollution. I wake up every morning, I check Google for the air pollution. My kids don't go on recess if the pollution is on specific level. And we're talking about like double-digit percentage of not going to recess for kids. It's a huge thing here. What I wanted to ask you is feedback. Do your product gives a feedback, not only purifying, but saying, I have purified that. The content of the air in this room is more of that. We usually like, I bought a $600 filter. It gives me some identification of what it was doing in the last hour. Do you have this kind of feedback in the software or anything?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So first, with the first part of your question, just to maybe clarify our angle in that collaboration, in the collaborations that we're forming with the Korean conglomerates and with other companies. So we, as I said, we're not aiming to become a consumer or home appliance company. We do aim to either provide OEM parts or even just license the technology when the business model of that technology is going to be some kind of a printer and ink model or based on a service model. So we have our cartridges that are need to be replaced every 3 to 9 months, right? Depends on the usage and depends on the mode of the use. And those cartridges would be replaced and sent back to the factories. So that's for the first part. It's mainly licensing, and this is why we allow ourselves to not just focus on the indoor air purification, but even tackle a bigger challenge, because still we're working on the same collaboration model of licensing the technology and creating the right collaborations and just providing the key parts and the software for the technology. So that's for that. And for the user experience, which is very much important, as you said, the feedback from the usage. So this is we envision a device that would not just sense the PM levels like these devices, these days are very much common, I think. And not even just the levels of the VOCs sometimes. There are sometimes devices that are focusing on the VOCs, or not even just the CO2. But an absolute solution that will start from the CO2 and will sense other gases and other particles in the room as well, but will also integrate the data to a level that the CO2 will be some kind of an indicator for us to even hint what are the percentages or what are the odds of being infected if there is a virus in the room, not necessarily coronavirus, for which we are very much efficient and we already validated our capabilities on eliminating in just 2 seconds of exposure the coronavirus, but also flu and other airborne pathogens are being treated very nicely by our system. So the feedback we want to create is a feedback that will give the user, right, even the odds of how much was eliminated from the air, CO2 and other pathogens.
So the answer is yes, basically.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. This is the
Okay.
future, and also the data is very important to be collected and analyzed in the later stages. It's important to our partners as well.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to finalize the panel by allowing each one of the startups providing some kind of like a very short mission statement for Korea, what we would like to achieve here. And then I will ask Dov and Dror also to try and finalize or give some kind of a statement on what they see for the future of Korea, Israel economies or business communities to work together. And then we will say hello, and maybe we can have some networking all together. Like I invite the Korean guests here to interact with us, ask some questions, and exchange some business card if you'd like. So let's start from you, Elad, your mission statement for Korea.
So I have many mission statements. So first of all, I think, it's a fact. So you have in Korea huge conglomerates, which means huge data, which means great customers. So I see there's going to be a lot of synergy here in adapting our technology, in utilizing it, and in actually bringing value to those companies. From the other side, manufacturing, memory technologies, system manufacturing, system design. There's not too many places in the world like Korea.
So you probably should move here to Korea to live here and do your business, because there's so many opportunities. Adal, moving to you, your mission statement here.
Okay, so mission statement. For the long term, we hope to collaborate with public schools in Korea and to be part of the Digital New Deal, to allow the Ministry of Education in Korea to use our big data in education, AI, and digital solutions online. For the short term, we want to revolutionize the English learning with private schools, edtech companies, and book publishers.
That's great. And you, Gil, what about you guys? You have lots of mission statements as well here, so pick one.
Quite a lot, but our vision is to significantly impact the well-being of people and the environment, and contribute to the environment and to people. So here in Korea, what we're willing to do, we know that the Korean conglomerates and the Korean market already have the awareness, and we know that the Korean companies have the capabilities. And after over 2 years of collaborating and discussing and building very, very solid and profound relationships with Korean companies, it is the time to bridge the gaps between such a small startup, right? We're 16 people, 16 employees so far, and growing really fast right now from Israel, and huge conglomerates, and try to bridge that and really collaborate in a fruitful way.
Thanks, Gil.
Thank you.
You, Dov, you have a strong experience and strong perspective on Israel and Korea working together, but maybe looking backwards until today, what do you see for the future for Israel and Korea?
Well, I will talk in two different directions. One, I would love to see Israel and Korea working much closer together. I think that there is a lot of place for cooperation. I do have a lot of respect to the Korean unique capabilities, hardworking, amazing execution that we in Israel are lacking. We do have innovation and execution are the two different sides that usually don't come together. But if you combine them, that's an amazing material. Personally, I established Go Ventures about 5 years ago. When I established the fund, in Israel, it wasn't easy for me, despite all my success stories and the billions of dollars that I generated for companies over the years. The mood was, hey, you're an entrepreneur. You are not an investor. Investor is finance, legal. And I said, no, it should be the opposite. I think that the right investors should be ex-entrepreneurs, people who really understand technology, people that clearly understands the meaning of entrepreneurship, understands the very difficult way entrepreneurs are going in their way to success. But anyway, I did okay, means my first fund currently stands on an IRR of over 55%. It's a very, very nice numbers. It's nicer numbers than Andreessen Horowitz or others in the States. So we are fine. We do have investors from all over the world. We don't have investors from Korea. So, hey, my personal mission, I would love to see a couple of Korean investors. And I think that through the investments, better relations of Korean companies with Israel startups.
Definitely. I would love to see more Korean investors going to invest into Israeli VCs as well as investing directly. And moving to you, Dror, last but not least.
I would like to answer you, but I need to go print my CV now because he's hiring. Yeah.
That's true, but still, you have a long history of experience here in Korea.
Yeah.
So what is your take on?
Just one correction. In case I do have one investment from Korea. Samsung is investor. Okay. But the guys who were investing in us from Samsung, actually, most of them were Western Israelis. I really would love to see, the SK, LG, the guys who doesn't exist in Israel coming to Israel through investment.
Yeah, but not only SK and LG, there are many other big conglomerates, less known in Israel, but big enough, and they are very much invited to invest. Moving to you, Dror.
Really briefly,
yeah, so what is your take?
Yeah, my 2 cents. After seeing, I think in the last 6 years, hundreds of Israeli startups trying to do business alliances and trying to get investment in Korea, I think I always see the same mistake because usually Israeli startups trying to expand to APAC, to Asia Pacific, usually Korea is rank 2 or 3 for them. They start Singapore, Hong Kong, China, obviously, and they have a headquarters in these countries which are not Korea, and they assume that Korea is yet another part of Asia, but it's not. And you let someone from Singapore manage sales in Korea, they don't know anything about Korea. I think it just requires a different treatment. I don't say that I know the answer. Obviously, some of the companies hired people who live here and know the market better. But this is a repetitive mistake, and it's a very expensive mistake because the kill chain is that you send the CEO over to Korea, he tries to sign some resellers, he fails, he comes back after 2 years, he signs more resellers, fails again. These are very painful cycles, and just don't think that Korea is yet another part of Asia. It's completely unique and different.
That's a very valid point, Dror. Thank you. And with that said, I would like to wrap up this entire panel by first thanking Mr. Ambassador for joining us today. For all of you that join us for listening, thank you very much. For Kita and KDB, once again, for great organization. And lastly, I would like to offer you guys, the Korean audience here, once we finish here, let's join together, have some networking, discuss some Q&A, and exchange some business cards. I think it's almost the most important thing here today to do. And with that said, once again, kamsahamnida, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
감사합니다.